Cindy?
Yeah, I think the only other
Rachel?
person that responded yes that is not here is Doug Lord, and I don't
Okay,
know if he had something come up.
okay. I hope he will be here. Should we, if he's not here, should we have a provisional minutes taker in his, it's gonna be Rachel. Okay, great.
We've got a volunteer.
Cindy,
Excellent.
you're on the screen twice.
Yeah.
I know. I like to be in multiple places at once.
And in fact, the second Cindy is actually me.
Extra tricksy.
Mhm.
All right, well, let's get going. Welcome everybody. And thanks to Cindy and Rachel for getting us to where we are today in terms of putting together a agenda and also doing some work on our IDA assessment document. That's kind of, I think, one of the big things we want to go through today is revisit that in light of the edits and updates that they've made there. I don't know if folks were able to access that from the agenda. The links in the agenda were not working for me. So in a minute, I'll pop some links in the chat for that. But the first item is just any updates. So I thought maybe we could do any updates from the 250 staff first, and then some share outs from anybody else who has stuff they want to talk about. Cindy and Rachel, you got any updates for us we should know about?
That is a great question. The last month has been a whirlwind.
Yes.
But what I will say is that we have gotten together. I'm not sure if you folks remember last summer now, either summer or October, the commission passed that events approval criteria. And so we've gotten that into a form now where folks can submit items to a community calendar that we're maintaining. We have an e-news drafted that should go out in the next day or so to share that information with the general public, but we will have a place on the website where people can see what's happening around the state. As of right now, I think there's one event. But that is something that we will be asking grantees to submit events for. So any funded programs and exhibitions and stuff that are funded by CTH that relate to the 250th or, yeah, the commission and its themes will be going on there. So that is the biggest news. We've also got a new local contacts page on there. And if you want to throw the link to both of those in the chat. So we've got both a list of every town and then also towns arranged by COG. So those are available to people, and the list is still growing, but it's a start. And those are the two biggest updates on our end. We are talking about, so the state of Connecticut Office of Tourism is no longer going to be doing the CT visit skin for the website that we talked about once upon a time. So we're now looking at what we can do to make the website a little more user-friendly for the general public. And we're not there yet, so the community calendar is Google, the submission form is Google, but eventually we'll have it looking a little prettier. And I think those are the big updates. If anyone has any other specific questions, happy to share as well.
Yeah. Would this also be a time, like, because I'm not on the commission or stewarding the commission, but I will say that Digital Humanities at CTH has been trying to figure out ways to connect to the commission and the themes. So we've done that just by basically putting links on Connecticut Stride Oregon Teach It to the commission and to the resource database. I'm working currently with our content manager to draft a call for content specifically related to the 250 themes. We're working with Cindy and Rachel on that, kind of to get more content and kind of say that directly related to the 250. And then we're also working on ways to highlight the themes in the content that we have in our platforms. So we'll be working with Cindy on that too, to kind of have a 250 place on connecticuthistory.org where we highlight the themes and then highlight some content that we believe connects to the themes as kind of an example of what you can do. So we've been working and chipping away at figuring out how we can tie our digital projects to 250 in the commission and be in alignment that way.
Great, thanks, Mike. The League of Museums had our conference, oh my gosh, is it almost 2 weeks ago? It really doesn't feel like it's been that long. On June 3rd, we had over 200 people there at CCSU, and there were some 250th related panels and sessions, and we also had Rachel and Cindy tabling for the commission there. I don't know if there was anything that you folks wanted to share about your interactions. I wasn't able to attend any of the 250th sessions myself, but I don't know if there's any news on that front or things that you felt were worth reporting. I did just want to mention that it was a big gathering in at least the museum field that was an opportunity for talking about 250th related stuff.
Yeah, we were able to attend a couple of the sessions, not all of them. But I will say I thought the Housatonic Museum of Art session was really great. They were talking about using art and history and the history of housing in Connecticut to engage people politically and civically in their communities. And it was a really great multidisciplinary project that I'm not sure if it can be brought to other communities because there were really specific people involved there. But in a time where housing is such a big topic in towns across the state, it just seemed really relevant, and the connections that they made to the 250th were great. And really thinking broadly about the themes and what we're doing for in terms of the work that the commission is putting together. So that one was great.
Great.
Kudos to them.
They've been doing some high model stuff with their new director and staff, which is key. So like I send them props. We're doing some work with them. They're becoming a leader across the nation in community college art museums. They don't even have a group of them. Like they're not included in the college arts and university galleries that whoever has it has. AM, I think maybe has had it for years and years. They don't want the community colleges involved. So yeah, there's
That is so interesting to know, Liz.
Oh yeah.
Oh boo.
But they are leaders.
Yeah, they are fantastic. I mean, Jennifer and Charlotte, they've been incredible. So I'm really glad to see. That was actually one of 2 sessions that we had at the conference that were related to sort of housing history and histories of discrimination and ways of using kind of historical records to engage in civic activism. Jack Doherty ran a session based on some of the work that he's been doing with a group of kind of like lawyers who are interested in history on, researching and removing restrictive covenants from individual homeowners' deeds. So, and I was actually, this was completely unrelated, but there was a Where We Live earlier this week where they interviewed some folks from, where was it, Illinois, I want to say, that were doing stuff around like sundown towns and, other kinds of, discrimination at the municipal level. So I just think there's kind of like, there seems to, that I think it relates to what you were saying, Cindy. There's a lot of interest in sort of like housing issues and some of these ways in which, segregation is embedded in communities and what are the mechanisms by which that happens. So it seems like there are some really interesting possibilities around civic engagement and history and using the work of history to tie to things that are very relevant in the present. Good. I'm trying to think other updates. On 250th, I know there was a Northeast gathering, and I don't know, Cindy, if you heard back from Natalie at the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History. There was sort of a reprise of this group kind of run out of New York and Vermont primarily that has been gathering states in the Northeast region to talk about 250th things. We were not able, it was the day after the league conference, so neither Cindy nor I, though we had been last year, were not able to attend. It was in Saratoga this year. But I believe Natalie from the Connecticut Museum went.
Yeah, so she reported on the Connecticut Commission's progress for us to the group. But much like last year, it was a lot of networking and mostly New York and Vermont people who are interested in Fort Ticonderoga, Ethan Allen. I can't remember what the battle march. So I think overall, she said that the most interesting part was the report back from all of the state commissions, but that was pretty brief in comparison to the whole day out there. So,
there was one thing that she highlighted in her email, and I don't know if you have it in front of you right now, Cindy.
So,
right, something
Rhode
that Rhode
Island
Island
is
was
doing Liberty trees around in every municipality in the state.
So it was like providing seedlings for folks to plant trees, which seemed like a kind of neat idea to me.
Well, that's very inexpensive.
Yeah. Anybody else updates? The things you want to share related to activities you've been involved in that have related to the 250th, Kathy?
Yeah, I'll just share that the Washington Rochambeau Trail has both a federal counterpoint as well as a nonprofit. The nonprofit is the one who really takes the lead on kind of putting together local meetings and providing some guidance and direction. And in Connecticut, despite having the longest segment, it's been dead for a long while. I think I made a plea for somebody at one of our prior, full commission meetings, and somebody heard the call. And so Christine Jewell has taken up the mantle as being the director. And we finally had a meeting after, I think, 3 years of not meeting. And she is doing a far better outreach, more inclusive effort, and not restricting it just to sites on the trail, but, people with interest and everything else. So it was a good first meeting, but again, it's just getting started. On the gossip side of it, the feds have parted ways with the nonprofit, so they are no longer funding them. But because the feds are not funding the nonprofit, it means that the Park Service is now going to have funding available for sites on the trail for activities or improvements that they might be doing.
Thank you. Jonathan
Kathy,
or Liz, anything? Oh, go ahead,
I was
Jonathan.
just going to ask Kathy, is that going to be in addition to like another round of the 250th grant, or do you think?
Oh, no, that's separate. So they have their own little Washington Rochambeau Trail bucket at the Park Service.
Okay.
And it's meant just for sites that are on the trail or to do programming activities related to the trail.
So was that money that was formerly given to the nonprofit, or is that okay? So it's
Well,
not.
yes, because it was really just a funnel in the past, and so the Park Service would funnel it through to the nonprofit. I don't know what the details are.
Okay, that's all. I was just curious. So conservation of money, not more money, just coming from different.
Yeah, now I think they've cut out the nonprofit and are directly funding some of these activities.
It's good to know.
Thanks. All right, I think we can move on to some of the work of the meeting. We have the IDEA assessment document that I'd love for us to take a look at. I popped a link in the chat. Oh, look, it's even updated since I since I looked at it. So I don't know if folks were able to look at this in advance. Was anyone able to spend a little time with this in advance of the meeting by any chance? Yeah. Okay, that's okay. Just want to know. Cindy and Rachel, do you want to talk about some of the edits and updates that you've made to this?
Yeah, so based on our last meeting, we did kind of a preface to explain what this is, how we're hoping people will use it. I think this can get cleaned up a little more, but it's
Yeah.
a starting point. And so this would be posted on the commission website, and we would be encouraging folks to do this self-assessment, not share back their results to us, but
Right.
use it as a starting point for when they're planning, promoting, implementing, and evaluating their events.
Yeah.
And this is based on the strategy screen that we were creating for the commission, but really has been translated to be more externally focused. So we went ahead and kind of used each of those screening points, for lack of a better word, criteria, as a goal for people and for organizations that are doing this work. And then we included this considerations explanation, I guess, under each goal. So that is, oh, yeah. Amorous or things, perfect. It's the only issue with our conference room setup. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Oh, yay, thank you. I'm taking notes. So this first portion is the preface, and then once you get over here to the first goal, so goal 1, measure the diversity and representation of community organization and groups involved in the planning process. And then we went through and kind of noted some of the different considerations that were discussed during our past meetings that we want people to think about when they're getting to the point of rating themselves. So noting that all communities are diverse in different ways. And then some of the questions that we want people to be asking themselves: who's the intended or typical audience for the event you're planning? Are the appropriate people at the table for the event that you're planning? Have you, to the best of your ability, sought out representation from different groups? Did you include anyone that you would not normally include? Have you spoken to someone you wouldn't normally speak to? So one of the questions we had was, there was this thought to include some more illustrative examples in this self-assessment. And there was a question of, do we include those in this considerations area, or do we want to include those in the rating area? So that was one question we wanted to bring back to you all. And then the other question, kind of across the board, is, are there resources that you all know of that we should be linking to under each of these goals? So what we're hoping for is that we'll have the goal, the considerations of rating, and then resources that people can use to kind of improve their work. So I will leave it there. And
Yeah, and I would say that my first question is, how are people supposed to assign the points? Like, do they just read the rating and give themselves a rating? Or are they supposed to be adding up like points? Because when there are points like that, it makes me think that I'm gonna like tick some boxes and then count up the number and then see where I fall. So I was just kind of wondering what the mechanism for the points is as you're imagining it right now, or if this is just okay, better, even better.
yeah, and I don't know, I think That's a
Yeah.
question. We went back and forth a little bit within this group. And I don't know if we want to say
Yeah.
0 points, you're doing a bad job. 1 to 3 points, you're on your way. And kind of create something like that at the end. Or if we're okay with just doing more good, better, best. You know where you lie and
Yeah.
where you can improve yourself.
I feel like there's going to be certain organizations that are going to be very specific with who their audience is, target
Yes.
and otherwise. And so I would make, if it were me, I would make the examples more illustrative as opposed to adding them to a rating system. Because, you know, like you might have, you know, I don't know, like a Native American group that won't necessarily include, you know, other groups within there. They might, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you know, as an example, given the kind of organization they are, the kind of work that they do, again, good, better, and different.
Yeah.
And there, but where as opposed to other organizations that might be more, more global in a sense in their outreach or their mission, you know, again, the kind of work that they do. So I would lean, you know, if we're talking about the rating system as it is, you know, good, better, etc., as opposed to you're doing a bad job. You know, some organizations are what they are, and they're just that's going to be. And again, you might have the same thing with an LGBTQ plus organization, right? Like that's the population they're going to focus on, to the, for lack of a better phrase, to the detriment of any other one. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing, such as it is. It's just a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does, and I think that's a good reminder that we should and we can and probably should bring in the idea of intersectionality in here somewhere, somehow.
Right.
And I think you're right that those examples might be a good way to do that.
And I would say, I would underscore that, like, I mean, there's a lot of, when I was just printed this out and was looking at it this morning, is like, there's a lot of abstract noun phrase stuff happening in here. You know, in framework for ensuring accessibility, inclusivity, equity for diverse audiences. You know, I feel like the more we kind of get it out of the abstract noun phrase space and into some concrete examples, I think it makes it less jargony. It also makes it seem less, you know, I don't know, like of a particular political persuasion potentially, and just more like this is guidance that is good for everybody to think about. These are always good questions for everybody to think about. And I think that it just might strengthen the document in terms of giving those, because the examples are going to be really different, right? You know, there are a lot of different ways to do this work, I think, is kind of what I'm hearing as well. It's not just one thing. I know this is something we talked about a lot in our last meeting.
I think the goal here also is that we're pushing for organizations to operate in good faith or best faith possible, as opposed to you're doing a good job, you're doing a bad job, right? So this is, I think the goal with this kind of document is that it's a guideline. It's a series of recommendations to follow to the highest degree possible. So I
And
think we
just
want
to
to
force people to be reflective.
Yeah.
Right. And right. And so I think we want to reflect that in the overall tone of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that might have to do with how we have people looking or rating. I'm not sure how I feel about rating, but just for lack of a better word, how we have people look at that rating system, you know, like, you know, things to consider, right? You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I think beating people over the head with things is not probably going to win us any friends.
Yeah. And I think even that move, right, things to consider as opposed to considerations, like that language move shifts it into a more concrete space. And then that I think is very well suited to addressing folks directly as like, are you doing this? Are you thinking about this? Have you asked yourself and your organization these questions? And I think a lot of the things that those are already there. So it sounds to me like folks want to kind of like remove the ratings really and just come up with a series of good questions to get people thinking in the right directions if they aren't already. And, share some three examples of some different way, like the kinds of organizations and events that, might be like doing this well. Like a small historical society, reaches out to, a group of people in the town that they haven't worked with before to involve them in planning an event related to the 250th that considers the role of housing discrimination in the community, since we were just talking about that. And, just like for each of the goals to offer a little key about like, what does this look like in the planning process? What does this look like? I forget what's next.
Yeah,
This
so I
is
think that works.
Outreach and then planning and then, yeah.
We can work on that and we can use kind of a historical society, larger museum.
And then I think having the example of a group that is like already serving, an underrepresented community, right? Like what does it look like for them?
Yeah.
So Amos, I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding. Are you saying replacing the ranking with something like, here is an example of excellent, application of these ideas. Here's an example of a good, and here's one of a fair.
I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. I think
Okay.
those are two options. You could do like some examples of the different kind of levels of this is really good, or we could just offer, say three. I'm just using three for the sake of a nice number. Three examples of what really good work would look like for different types of organizations or different types of events.
Well,
To
and
get
so
it kind
here's
of out
my,
of the rating space and more into the like, this is the goal. I don't know. I mean, it's just a made up example. So
and that's my question. So
yeah.
I have no strong opinion, but I do think that takes it from like a self-assessment to something else. And if that's what we all agree it
Yeah.
should be, I'm okay with that, but I just want to make sure that, because we've been talking about it as a self-assessment for a few
Yeah.
meetings now. So if we're moving away from that to a guide for person or something like that, I think that's fine, but I just want to make sure we all still feel as good about doing more of a guide than a self-assessment.
So I think that the central thrust of IDEA is exactly what Cindy mentioned earlier, which is the concept of intersectionality. I feel like we can change the tone of this thing if we put something in what's at the top, it was like an introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we, in the preface, if we say something in the preface about intersectionality, IDEA and relating it to intersectionality, and then throughout the rest of the document, our questions that we're asking these organizations to ask themselves reflect that a little bit more than maybe they do now. I think that will be very helpful. Because I think that really is the overall goal. Right.
Yeah, Jonathan, I agree with you, and I think it's such an important part because in actualizing any of these, what happens is it becomes performative. Oh, I need to tick this box, I need to tick this box, I need to tick this box. And what you're not really thinking about is the fundamentals of that intersectionality. So
Correct.
I 100% agree with you. I think that is key to everything. Thank you for
I,
phrasing that so well.
no, I think you actually said it better than me, Kathy. So thank you. That's terrific.
Do we have thoughts in response to, Cindy's more pointed question about like whether this is a self-assessment or
Yeah.
whether it's a guide?
I think it gets back to this same thing. When you make it a self-assessment, you're putting in check boxes. When it becomes a guide, I think it forces you to be more reflective and really think about principles.
Yeah.
So I'm all for a guide, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think about this from the other side. If I were an organization looking at this as a guide versus a self-assessment, might I might I be done reading it and go, so what do I do with this?
Mhm.
That's the only pushback I have on it being a guide. It's that's a tough
Yeah.
question for me to answer in at least in this current moment.
All right, just keep that. I'm going to keep that. Excuse me a minute.
Yeah, I don't know what,
Could it, so I'm for the self-assessment. I can go either way. I'm not married to any idea, but maybe instead of rating, maybe it becomes more of an evaluation, of your current practices, and then kind of aspirational goals being the examples.
Well, it's maybe the question is okay, what are we hoping as a result of having this document? What do we hope? How do we hope people will use it? Right? Like what was the original, and maybe it's not the original purpose, right? We sort of envisioned this as one thing. And now what do we think, having had all these discussions, what do we think the most useful tool to share would be? And I guess I would start off by saying, you're never going to convince the people who want to do it the way they want to do it that they should do it another way. However, there are people, and we know because we work with them, who would like to have a guide to doing it. I'm going to just put right in question in right. That's what we hear a lot. We would, but we don't know how. Like, can you tell us how? And my suggestion is that this would be they would be the primary users of this, the ones who are like, I just need a resource. I need to be. And so what they would want to what probably is a way of thinking about how they can do things, maybe look at things maybe a little bit different. And again, I don't want to use any pejorative language, but like if I'm hearing we should be thinking about this a little differently because I went to the league conference or I'm seeing, other things, then maybe but I still don't really get it. So I think that goes back to like, I don't think they want to necessarily grade themselves. And I think that we don't want to be grading them. However, we want to use the power that we have for good, and try to advance learning. And I think that, so I admit I was going in and out because I had to take a call, but I loved what was said about the examples. Like, I do think people love examples. But I also think if we're going to create a document, especially if it's going to live online, that's going to be useful, it should be really short and it should be click here for more, click here for more, like the way an electronic newsletter goes out, click here for more. Is this helpful? Like, and so maybe it's sort of more of based on what we have, more of a map of things to consider. as you're planning, I don't know, I'm just like, just looking at where we're going, sort of, that seems to be more of where we have been heading.
I think that sounds and feels right based on what everybody's been saying and our past meetings as well. So I think we can reformat what's here, kind of remove the ratings to an extent, well, remove them altogether. Try to find some of those examples that keep it short, but still are a good idea. And in that case, I think what would be really helpful, and it doesn't necessarily have to be right now, but if folks could send over to us any resources any click here's for more that you have. I think that would be really helpful for us. We have some resources and have collected some. I know, for example, Liz, you shared something from the YMCA in Boston for developing an accessible event. And we'll add some of those resources in here, but if anyone has anything else that we should be directing people to, that would be really helpful.
The other thing is, so I think this is like the first stop resource, but there could be something. We could have another thing that says, are you ready for more? Right? And so like want to go even deeper, want to challenge yourself further. And we don't necessarily need to have the document, a document that says anything more than, here's some like interesting webinars or resources that really challenge you, that are more along, the lines that we began when we were talking with Merle. And certainly, I do think people don't push back against, accessibility as much as they push back against some of the other things that we've been talking about sometimes. So maybe we have that, like, now, is this not if you're ready for more, here's more.
I think that it's going to be easy to, looking at this, it seems like the vast majority of the questions that are asked in this document are yes/no questions, right? So the idea is, so I think because of that, it'd be easy to remove the rating system, because the idea is you want to be able to answer yes to more of these questions than no. And so with that in mind, I think I'm thinking of, there's a quote by Vince Lombardi where he said, "Perfection's not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence." You want to be excellent, get yourself to answer yes to as many of these questions as possible. That's the idea behind it.
I think that's a great move, I think, for turning this into, more of a guide where people can kind of see where they're falling without, feeling evaluated in that way. And I would also say, I wonder if, part of one of the ways to make this a more streamlined document is I think we structured it around the goals that, the set of goals and metrics that were set out for us as a subcommittee. I'm not sure that the language of those specific goals needs to be in the guide. I think that we could come up with just a shorter set of prompting questions that address those different stages of the process and get rid of some of that stuff that's informed the creation of this document without getting too deep into the weeds. I think it brings it down to that more concrete level. It takes away a lot of the stuff around measuring and that kind of language, and just moves it into a space where it can be shorter and more useful, and make space in the document for the illustrative examples, as opposed to prefatory comments or, a guiding goal. We could still structure it around, like envisioning, planning, execution, and, outreach, or whatever the four are. But I think doing it less in the language of the particular IDEA metrics would probably be a good idea.
And I think couching all of this in the idea that, because people will be more open and receptive to hearing it if you say good things about what it is to be. There are many good things about what it is to be an American. So 100%. But like couching it in, as a nation, as a people, we are constantly learning, constantly striving, like really couching it. And so we offer this because we all want to see a world where X, Y, and Z, right? And then because that is what we're looking for. And any movement is good movement, especially if it's sustainable movement. I really think that. I think that people are ready for it. Like, having just been talking to tons of people from the South and Texas and all those places, like I came away thinking, yep, just what I thought. It's the media. Like it's the media and the politicians that are dividing us. It is not the people. We are not that far apart. Like literally everybody was like, oh, live and let live. Like, which is not necessary, but honestly, if everybody said live and let live, I'd be like, okay, let's do that.
Amherst, I'm just going to say, I love that idea. And I think it gets to where we first started, which is the language that's being used. And to Liz's point about some people, these ideas are going to be brand new. The language that's currently being used in these goals, and it's so structured and seems so very institutionalized. And I think it really, Amherst, you're used to working with low capacity groups. Some of it's just going to be an immediate turn off. And I think you're right. The goal is to get people to do things better, to do them the right way, or, however we want to talk about it. But I think easing, and I feel bad because I know a lot of effort's already been put into this document. So I feel bad saying, hey, can we start it over again? But I do think to make it more user friendly and engaging, those are all such good recommendations.
No, it's okay that there's been a lot of work. It took the work to get here.
And don't lose anything that we've done, Leanne. Like, this is one thing I always tell people, don't make it go away. Don't lose that version. Like, I know people like things are automatically served, but let's keep all the iterations because we may find that we're there and we need to go back because we need to be punching this up.
And listen, there's lots of good stuff in there. I think it's just, I think Amherst's point of just when I looked at the document again and took those goals out, it immediately became a different type of document. It looked different.
Yeah. That's good. It's also just like a writing pet peeve of mine is like, concrete, like, that is what like illustrative examples and like real things, people doing things, like all writing should be about like people doing things, and not about abstract noun phrases doing abstract things to other abstract noun phrases. That's just like, as a historian, that's how I want everything to be written. But I do think I think it'll, and I think, your point, Liz, about the kind of framing that we can do around this could be really inspiring. I really love that move. Like, as a nation, we're constantly learning and striving, and like, this is a part of it, and here's why, and, here's where we're headed. I think it's very appropriate to what we're trying to do as a commission.
And I think the other thing is, no matter how you feel about it, you don't have to feel good about it, but you can still have a voice in it, right? I think that's part of the joy of this.
Cindy and Rachel, do you feel like you have what you need, and that we have, so I have in terms of action items for the subcommittee, hey Jason, is send resources your way.
Yes, so I would say yes, send resources our way. I think we can take another stab at this based on this conversation, and I would like to try to get it back to you all before our next meeting so that, because I am hoping that at our next meeting is the week before the full commission meeting, and I want to have you guys present this at, you Amherst, present this at the next commission meeting. As being reflective of really the work that this subcommittee has been doing. So because of that, I want to make sure that we're in a place by the next meeting where we're happy sharing this out.
Sounds good. I will
Great.
be remote for the next full subcommittee meeting, but I'm happy to join remotely.
Full commission meeting, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
fine.
we're always remote for these meetings.
Yeah.
I will not be physically in the old State House or wherever we're planning on being.
I think we'll be letting people know by the end of this, either tomorrow or early next week. But I
Fine.
think the hope is that we're gonna be at Mashantucket at the Pequot
Great.
Museum.
Great.
So, and that is based on feedback from both this subcommittee and the governance subcommittee that we should kind of move around our meetings a little more and take it to where people are. So we'll be working on that as we move forward. And making sure that the sites that we're choosing are fully accessible.
Great. I think it's a great idea.
So the next sub item on the agenda is applying this to the outreach list, and I don't think we're there yet, so I'm gonna put a pause on that. But the other conversation that we had at some of these past meetings is creating other toolkits and or self-assessments and or guides, whatever we wanna call it, for other items. And our question was, can we base that on the events criteria? And in thinking about that, we asked people to confirm that their events are ADA accessible, historically accurate, and nonpartisan. So can we create a way, something similar to this for some of those other, and ADA is more presenting what ADA accessible means, because I think a lot of people still don't know or understand that, to Liz's point from last meeting. But also for historical accuracy and nonpartisan, are there questions that people can be asking themselves when they're thinking through an event to make sure that they're using good primary sources and things like that. So are these guides that we think make sense? Are there other guides that we would want to put together?
Well, I think it does make sense, just, I mean, it's quite logical if these are the ways that we're asking people to, think about their events and ensure that they are these three things. That makes sense to offer some guidance, whether it's in one document or three, or however we want to think about it. I think but it makes good sense to me. I feel like the ADA one is in some ways a lot more straightforward than the others. Because that's, there's law and, although maybe I am not, maybe I'm not understanding the full, that may just be ignorance, but it seems to me that one might be a little more straightforward than the others in some ways, but.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think the example that Liz shared at our last meeting was like an ESL interpreter. If that is requested and you get any kind of federal funding, you have to provide it. And I think lots of people don't know that. So finding what the other requirements are that people don't know about and then telling them where they can find help for it.
Yeah. So I think the other thing is like, are there any lacunae here? Like, do those three kind of cover it? That seemed to be the sort of second question that you were asking.
We'll take silence as agreement.
It's a good place to start, right? I mean, and I guess we can learn, if people are asking for other things and you see, or like, oh, how do I do this? That would tell us something, but. if there's no demand for it, there's no real point in making it, right? Is there more work that you'd like us to do in talking about any of these three toolkit resources today?
I
Or do you
don't,
want to move on?
I'm okay moving on, but what I will
Okay.
say is when you all are looking for resources that we would want to include in that IDEA self-assessment, if you see any resources that touch on any of these other points,
Yeah.
send them around the same time and
Yeah.
we'll keep an eye out.
Okay.
So moving out to public outreach. We've been thinking about the need to really expand our public outreach. And have put together a short list of some fairs and festivals that seem like good fits for the work that we're doing. And if anyone wants to share the screen.
I'll do
to
that.
make sure that everybody can see, thank you. These felt like ways to get in a few different communities around the state with big groups of people. That would also hit on some of the audiences that we haven't been reaching as much, not our traditional museum audience, but other cultural organizations and groups. So we have one event that Denise in particularly felt strongly about was the Boombox Parade in Willimantic, which takes place on the 4th of July. And she felt like this would be a great place to get visibility for the commission. Bonanza takes place on Saturday, July 6th, and that is Hartford's 4th of July fireworks that we're hoping to build onto in the future for the 4th of July in 2026. So that is another opportunity. We've talked a lot about reaching the Hispanic community in Connecticut, and so thought that Meriden's Puerto Rican Festival might be a good one. Head of the Department of Education. Yes, Miguel Cardona, thank you. Has been affiliated with this event in the past,
Okay.
and so it seems like a good connection there. The West Indian Independence Celebration in Hartford. The Maritime Heritage Fest, at least in part because it does take place at Fort Trumbull and ties in deep. And some of the other folks we've been trying to work with. Thinking about the LGBTQ community and Hartford Pride, and then the gathering, which is not yet confirmed, but in Waterbury, and really celebrating the diversity of that city, but it's pretty reflective of the diversity of Connecticut as a whole. And so I think we were hoping that this subcommittee would kind of say, one, yes, this looks like a good there we go. Sorry, we lost you for a second. One, that this looks like a good representative list, and two, that see if anybody would be willing to help table at these. Most of them do require people to be there for the entire event, so we would also be happy to send out an invitation to folks who have filled out the interest survey to see if any of those folks would be interested in helping with this. But it is a lot of weekends, so we would be looking for support to make these happen.
I know Kathy put a suggestion in the chat, the Dragon Boat Festival. I don't know if you want to say more about that, Kathy.
No, I know it's probably the primary festival related to Asian American culture in the state. So is this something that we could talk about at the next commission meeting and maybe, you know, put together a, you know, commission member or volunteer chart for taking a few hours over a couple weekends to maybe spread, you know, or share in this wonderful opportunity?
I love that. I think we could do that. There are 2 events that are coming up before the next commission meeting and we can share it with everybody. Yeah. I'm just hoping that we are able to get some volunteers because I do worry that it is not tenable if we don't get volunteers on board as well.
I think that's exactly why it should go out to the whole group.
Yeah.
Yeah, volunteering should just not be the responsibility of this subcommittee for these things. It really should be for the whole commission.
And there may be folks who like live close to, you know, say like live in the Willimantic area where it's more convenient for them.
Right, or have connections with the organizations as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
What will the commission provide, like, you know, materials, other things like that? It just seems like, especially if we're going to have folks who are not commissioners, who are, you know, folks who expressed interest, like that some kind of guidance about like what we're doing and stuff to give away and what they should be, you know, what the pitch is or what, you know, what, when somebody comes to the table, what are you supposed to do? You know, I don't know if that's something that we need to talk about in this subcommittee or if that's something you guys have already kind of figured out. I know you kind of had swag in here, tent, pop-up banner, stickers, copies of the field guide.
Yeah, I think all of those are great. I think the biggest talking point is at this point, especially with these more public events, the 250th is happening in 2 years. I do think the museum community is getting there, legislators are getting there, but the general public is still not quite there.
Yeah.
And then talking about some of these local committees, if you're interested, get involved with your local group. I think trying to push people towards local groups as much as possible, instead of having them volunteer to help on the commission, which is generally what's been happening. I think that's really important. Are there other things that you all feel we should be sharing with the general public?
I think if the push is to get people to join or start a local group, then the ASLH technical leaflet on starting a local 250th commission is like a piece of material that could be good to be able to provide in paper at the table, right? If that's part of the action item, then here's something you can give to somebody on like, here's how to do it. In addition to the resources that are already on the commission website. Here's where you go to find out if there is a commission already in your town. And if there isn't, here's where to get started. And that's the one that ASLH made free for everybody. So you can also include a link, but I think if there's some kind of, you know, takeaway collateral, that might make sense.
Yeah, and we have quite a few of those printed out. We had them at CL at the conference. At your conference.
Great. You can see I spent a lot of time at your table.
No worries. And then we have some bigger, like more elaborate stickers that are based off of the graphic note taking from the conference, from the Declaring Freedom conference, that are shaped around the themes, and we're planning to make those available with a donation of $10 or more to the commission. So there will also be some QR code for people to donate. And we'll work on what exactly the framing and language is for that, but we have some really basic stickers with just the commission's logo, and then some more elaborate ones focused on the themes that are going to be fun. So
Wait, so people give a donation and they get stickers? Okay.
like more of a bumper sticker type sticker.
Oh, okay.
The nicer, bigger, really pretty stickers, not just, we'll see. Yeah.
Okay.
And
I see something about volunteer coordinator or interest surveys here. Is that something that you want to say a little bit more about?
I'm trying to remember. So the interest surveys is what I mentioned earlier, just
Right.
looking for those and seeing if there are folks who might be interested in volunteering. What was the hope with the volunteer coordinator? I'm sorry.
I don't remember, honestly. I think we just threw it out there that maybe somebody wants to be one, but it's probably me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah, I see that you have other tabs in the sheet around, festival, some mechanism for doing that kind of staffing. And then I think we had also talked about some of the conferences, and there's presentations here. I don't know if you guys want to talk about this at all, or if we're really just kind of looking at the summer festivals.
I mean, folks are welcome to look at these presentations.
Mhm.
Some of them have already taken place, some of them haven't.
Mhm.
It's really been a way for us to track the different organizations that have been mentioned as
Okay.
people who might want to hear more about the commission and its work. And I think some of these organizations are from the spreadsheets that were put together by this group probably last fall at this point. Some of
Yeah.
them are ideas from the education subcommittee. And then some are ideas from Denise and the leadership committee, who is helping with fundraising for the commission. So it's a variety of different places, but just thoughts as to who might be interested in the work that we're doing and when can we present to them.
Okay, great.
So it is all information we're happy to share. Nothing is
Great.
secret.
I know that in one of the earlier meetings, and this may not be the focus for summer, more thinking about the fall, but we had talked about, I see you have the Big E on here, but more local, like agricultural fairs and things like that, which is definitely something that gets general public sort of out in late summer into the fall. Is that something we're still thinking about, or were you focused more on these kinds of festivals for now?
So it's twofold. One, the agricultural festivals are really expensive.
Okay.
And they usually
What are they?
require you to be there for many days,
Yes.
which,
Like 4.
yeah, like 4 days.
Yeah.
So I think we're hoping to start with these smaller 1-day festivals and kind of figure out the process and make sure that we have volunteers, that we have the right talking points so volunteers feel comfortable speaking. We have the right kind of staffing structure to make this happen. And then I think we can talk about some of the bigger festivals. The Big E is on there because I think there is some kind of nonprofit table that you can do for 1 day, and that might be worth it.
Yeah.
but I don't think we have the manpower to staff the full festival.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like we're done with item 4. We good on
Yeah,
that? All right, I'm gonna stop the share on this one. So the action item there is whether there are any others, and then, to get that circulated to the larger list, especially for those July events, that are on there. Okay.
and then
Those are gonna be
before-
tough because they're right around the holiday, so we'll have to find a very special person indeed, I think. But that's where I think, the Willimantic one, maybe you get Diane Nadeau or someone who's in Willimantic, at one of the museums or the chamber, or, somebody who's kind of gung ho, who would be there anyway to do it, right? I will not be in Connecticut. So, alrighty. Brainstorm for this conference. Do you want to give we had talked about, do you want to frame this?
Yeah, I'm happy to frame it, and then I think we can consider, our group has gotten small today, so I also wonder if we might need a bigger group.
Okay.
I know we talked after the last conference about, given limited funding for the commission and for our work, we talked about trying to think of some larger organizations or people who we could involve in something like the Declaring Freedom Conference. That in addition to helping to plan it, might be able to help fund it. And one idea we've had is, because we've been working with them on a couple of things, is Yale Beinecke. Because they do have funding for community outreach and deeper pockets than some other organizations. But are there other organizations or large constituencies that we could bring together to help plan something like the conference, that we can kind of pool our resources, reach a common goal, and get things done?
Hmm.
And I might say, I feel like Andy had some ideas. And so I'm wondering if this might be a better conversation when we have more people online with us.
Yeah, I mean, certainly thinking about colleges and universities is a good thought, right? Since they have space, even if you got somebody to host you, so you didn't have to pay for the space, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like an in-kind donation. And then there might be, expertise or resources at the institution that you could draw on.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, they spend all their money on their basketball coaches. So why would they have any money? I was reading an incredible, anyway, I probably shouldn't talk about it in this meeting, but no, I know UConn history has no budget. And Lamont was like, UConn will figure it out. We want to make Hurley the highest paid coach in all of college basketball. It's where are our priorities here? Anyway.
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 Um,
Okay, so maybe we table that for the next meeting.
yeah. And there is one other thing that did not make it to the agenda that I was hoping to at least get your opinions on. And then we can bring this conversation to the broader commission as well. But we receive a lot of resources, like people willing to perform and people
Books.
wanting to give lectures and books that people are wanting to sell. We don't feel comfortable vetting it necessarily. And don't really feel like it's our role. So right now we have two options, either say, thanks, but we're not sharing this, which is kind of where we are right now. Or do we feel like it would be helpful, because organizations are asking for resources? Would it be helpful to put together a unvetted resource list that has a disclaimer that says we are not promoting or endorsing, thank you.
Yeah.
Any of these organizations, but you can reach out to them.
Yeah, I mean, our office does that. We have lists that we provide to people when they're looking for someone. And exactly, it has those disclaimers that say, you know, we're not endorsing this person. We're not saying you can't use somebody else, but if you need to get the conversation started. But I'm wondering, and like, this is where you're going to find out how old I am and have zero technological savvy. Is there some kind of like just a, you know, an online, you know, board where you can just like post, this is what I'm looking for, and somebody can respond to it? You know, maybe work it the other way rather than providing the list of people who are available, but provide a list of people who are looking for someone.
Or just host like a forum that
Okay, yeah,
is
there you
not
go.
necessarily like moderated by for anything other than like don't say bad stuff. You know, like some kind of bulletin board where you could connect people who are doing that, who are interested in looking and or providing services.
I think if we're going to be, we need to be consistent. If we are going to carefully vet events like we are, then we would definitely need to carefully vet resources. Because if we don't, and we put out a list of resources that we say, look, you know, we're not endorsing this, that, and the other, we are potentially going to receive pushback from organizations that we're going to host events. Like, well, you carefully vetted all these events, but you're not vetting your resources. So I think better to do something like Kathy and Amherst are suggesting, some sort of forum that just sort of allows that stuff to happen, that might potentially be unvetted, although that's dangerous too. But I think for consistency, if we're going to vet events, then we need to vet resources. So we can't, if we're not going to endorse one end, we should not endorse all the way around. It actually, as difficult as that might sound, it does in the end make our lives easier.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I also wonder if this is something where that whole regional 250th, the very first meeting started because they did not want everyone fighting over resources during that, you know, those last few events of the final celebrations. That is where it started at. And I wonder if you could push back on that regional organization and say, hey, listen, we're hearing that there's this request for this thing. Have you guys thought about putting together a vetted list of resources? Because that is why they regionally started planning, that was specifically around resources. So you may want to go back to them and ask.
That's a great idea, Kathy. Give it to somebody else. And I think that the region is a good way to do it, because I think that people who do want to like market their services are probably willing to like, you know, drive around the Northeast to sort of, you know, give their talks and whatever.
And it, you know, it is a way that they could potentially parlay it into some type of a fundraiser. Like if, you know, if we can vet you and if we list you, you have to pay a, you know, $50 fee or something.
Yeah, I think it's like how are you going to vet all those resources? That's just like a huge question. Like, I think for an event, it's easier to kind of like, it's circumscribed. How are you going to vet? Like, you know, you'd have to send people out to like see if these people are giving good talks, you know, like, no, like we can't do that. you know, to read the books and other things like that. We just do not have the bandwidth. So, although it is an interesting idea, Kathy, to use it on the other side. It was like, well, if you want us to list you, you can like pay for our time to actually evaluate you. That's basically what they'd be paying for to be listed. So that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think I don't think people would be willing to pay enough to make it worth it.
I think that you're probably right about that. Yeah.
And money doesn't create capacity at the end of the day.
No.
That's still wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Exactly. So no, this is helpful.
Okay, good.
I think that was the gut feeling was that that an unvetted list was scary. So I'm glad we're all in agreement and we'll work to find a different solution.
Yeah.
That's all we have.
Okay, good. Well, I'm just gonna leave Doug in his, I don't think he's been overwhelmed by fielding inquiries, so I think that we'll just leave that in place. And does anybody have anything else? We can adjourn a little early otherwise. Great, I'd be happy to let people go. Cindy and Rachel, I've just thought maybe we could come up with an agenda for the next meeting after everybody's gone, or like a tentative agenda. So that we can kind of have that ready to go and revisit in the week before our next meeting. Because I find that's a better way for me to work. So I'm not like, what did we talk about? What were we going to do? So I can stay on for a few minutes if that sounds good. Great. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you. Enjoy this lovely day.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Happy birthday again, Jonathan.
Happy birthday, Jonathan. Bye.